Welcome back to another season of Workish. I'm so beyond excited if you are here to join me for this next series. This is going to be all about Generation Z, and that is something that I am incredibly passionate about. Most of you would know that if you are here, but in case this is the first time you've been catching this, my name is Hannah MacDonald-Dannecker, and this podcast, Workish, is all about helping educate the next generation on the different opportunities that are in front of them. I was a substitute teacher for a long time. Now I'm a staffing agency partner. I work in my family's business called the Better Together Group of Companies. We work with companies across Canada and the US to help find them the employees that they need. And so from that, I work with different companies all across North America, which means I see jobs all across North America, which means I have an understanding of how absolutely insane some of the jobs are. And so I just understand that in high school, they're not really helping educate that next generation on all of the opportunities that are really in front of them. Kind of you see what is in front of you. You see teachers, you see professors, perhaps you see firefighters and doctors and dentists and some of the very, very baseline normalized roles that you know day by day. But then there are so many random things in this world, like a truck driver who works in a farm and catches chickens is one of my favorite examples to use because that's one of the first jobs I learned about that absolutely blew my mind. One of the most recent ones was a scuba diver who goes in pools on a regular basis and detects leaks and then fixes and patches them. Like, excuse me, just scuba diving on a regular basis. Like, there are so many different kinds of jobs. And so the first series was all about women in male dominated spheres. I talked to 9 different incredible women, just absolutely mind-blowing, the different things that they do. I talked to a pilot and it was really interesting to learn about her experience and how she got involved. And she talked a little bit about doing a circle check around the plane and looking for the little minute problems and trying to catch those things. And then what it was like to learn about getting in the engine and like getting her hands dirty and really understanding the nitty-gritty mechanics of what the plane actually functioned like. And that blew my mind. I couldn't believe that that was a part of what that training looked like. I was just like, are you kidding me? I never would have expected that. And so it was really interesting to learn about that. I spoke with a public speaker who we talked all about the concept of achievement and how you strive for it and how you reach for it and how sometimes this can be a really healthy mentality, but how sometimes this can be a really negative mentality too, and kind of how she dealt with that through her career and made all these different little pivots and got to the place that she was at. I talked to some women who were really, really young, who were just starting out their careers. I talked to some women who are very senior in their careers. I had some amazing conversations with different people. And if you're interested at all in any male-dominated industries, go check that out because I think that is incredibly just eye-opening. But this series specifically, this Gen Z series, is created specifically not for the Generation Zs to learn about different careers, but to give the Generation Zs the platform that they deserve to stand up and explain in their own articulation who they are and why they are the way that they are. So I've been giving for the last year and a half a different presentation on who Gen Z is and how we can best recruit and retain them. But through that, I've had so many different question periods where people are just standing there asking me different questions and trying to understand who the next generation is and how they can connect with them. And sometimes I've got great answers for them, but sometimes I don't. And so I really wanted to bring a place where I could have more than just my voice, but all different Gen Zs from the youngest to the oldest of the generation. Now, I didn't find anybody who was 12 because Gen Z goes from 1997 to 2012. So they're between the ages of 12 and 26. And so I found a 16-year-old to connect to, an 18-year-old. We've got some people who are kind of scattered throughout that generation. And if you know somebody, I'm not quite done finishing it, I would love to connect with them and extend the series and really just shed more light. And so please feel free to make those introductions. But that's kind of what that lineup looks like right now. Now we've got a split between 5 guys and 5 girls. And I really tried to find some interesting variety between the things that they're doing. So I've got a Gen Z who's an entrepreneur. I've got a Gen Z who works in corporate. I've got a Gen Z who's coming in as a content creator. I've got a Gen Z who's coming in that's what's the right word? An influencer. I've got a Gen Z that's coming in who works in the trades. I've got someone coming in who is still a student in high school. I've got someone coming in who's a university athlete. I've got someone coming in who's in their master's degree. And so I really tried to get across a wide variety of education, but also a wide variety of just experience. And so we've got a really interesting lineup of different people across the generation and across different industries that are going to come on and talk about what they do and why they do what they do and really just break it down. But typically, as we go through my presentation, we talk about a couple different things. And through the podcast, I have found that it has been really interesting to not only see how these things are playing out in their lives, but also how they're affecting them on a regular basis. And so what I talk about with Gen Z is I start by setting the grounds for let's understand who they are. Who is Gen Z and why are they the way that they are? So I start by going through, okay, Generation Z is 1997 to 2012. They're high school students, they're university students, some of them are still in middle school or just graduated. And it's interesting because people look at this and they're like, oh my gosh, what a massive generation. And I'm like, actually, this is the smallest generation to date. And then we go through and we talk about all the different generations a little bit. We understand kind of a ground perspective about who each of those generations are, just on a very granular perspective. And then we talk a little bit about what makes Gen Z who they are. So what built them into the beings that they are today. And this is technology, globalization and human connection, and then COVID-19. And so through those things, we talk about what makes them great employees based on those things and what employers can use through those attributes and like how they can utilize what makes Gen Z who they are to be the best employees that they can be in their organization. And that's kind of the first thing that we touch on. And then we go into the barriers that they're going to face. So what is standing in front of Gen Z's way? And when we talk about that, we talk about a wide variety of different things. We talk about oh my gosh, what even are they? I'm drawing a blank. We talk about educational change. Gen Z really doesn't want to go to university. They don't want to spend money. We talk about why and then what employers can do to help them overcome that. We talk about the COVID disconnect and some of the barriers that they're facing because they just genuinely missed out on a lot of things. We talk about flexibility and how as a generation, they crave it aggressively, but how as employers you can really but change what flexibility means to you. And so for so many people, they're like, I really want flexibility. And in fact, I think it's 72% of Gen Z that would accept a job immediately if flexibility was offered to them. But flexibility could be what they're doing at work every single day. Maybe they have half a job here and half a job here, half in marketing, half in sales. That's what I do. And so I love that flexibility. Maybe it's you let them work from home sometimes. Maybe they're in the office sometimes. Maybe they do weekend work sometimes and they don't come in during the week. Maybe you let them shift up their schedule or the hours that they're working or whatever that is. Or maybe just once a month, they take one day to go sit in a different department and learn about that other department because that's what they care about. And so there's lots of different opportunities for flexibility, and we talk about all of those different things. And then we go through a couple other barriers that they're facing. And if you want to know more, you should definitely hit me up. I'd love to come and give you the presentation and talk to your team. But then as we finish out the barriers, we move further into what we're going to do now. It's like, okay, cool, Hannah, you've taught me about them. We know who they are and why they are the way we are. We know how we can use them as employees, but I still don't really know how to communicate with them, how to effectively have a conversation back and forth where I can learn from them and have them learn from me. Like, I don't know what to do. And so we start with listen to learn to understand, and then understand to speak. Now, at the end of my presentation, somebody asked me last time, Hannah, what are you telling the next generation? How do we tell them to grow up? And I was like, you know what? I'm still listening. It's a great question. I would love to know. I wrote a book about, well, shit, it's time to grow up. And there are lots of things within that that I thought were valuable lessons for me as I grew up. But what I'm actually saying to the next generation, I don't know. Like, there isn't anything yet in my brain in regards to how we can accurately help people move forward. I think it's a mind-blowing mind-blowing concept of just life is crazy and this generation is trying to figure it out themselves. And so ideally through these 10 episodes, I will be able to connect with different people, and maybe I'll have an answer for you at the end of this, or maybe I won't, but we'll hopefully learn a little bit along the process. And so I talk to each of these Gen Zs. I kind of bring them back to, let's start at high school. What happened in high school? Maybe we want to start at the end of high school, depending on how old they are and when their journey really began. For some of them, they're not even out of high school yet. And so I'm like, well, help me understand where this started for you. And we just go back to the beginning of where it started for them based on what they're doing right now in their life. And so it's really interesting to kind of navigate through these stories. And I think that a lot of people are going to say, well, Hannah, maybe you chose some really special Gen Zs. Maybe these are the abnormal Gen Zs in the world. And what I would say to that is that they're not. I think that so many people have a just preconceived notion about who Gen Z is. They think that we're lazy. We think that we're lame. We think that we're incredibly anxious and that we don't know how to do anything. We're depressed. We don't move forward. We have no ambition. That's so many things that I've heard from so many people. But then I've also heard that we have so much ambition and we're the least lazy generation and we move so fast, and it's such a contradiction at so many different periods. And so it's really, I tried to grab some very average Gen Zs in my life, and some of them are absolutely excelling beyond others. I will for sure say that. And some of them are just being themselves. And so it's interesting to see how each of them have really gone through their own individual journeys, but also have lined up with the others around them in so many ways. And so I'll just be really, really excited to talk to lots of people about the different episodes that I do and the different conversations that I have. But before I do this with all the other Gen Zs, I thought it might be beneficial to walk through my own journey with you guys. And so I was chatting with all of them, bringing them through the process. And I was like, well, I am a Gen Z. Maybe that's how we start this. And so let's get started. When I think back to where my journey began, I suppose I would say it was in 9th grade. I really wanted a job. And at the age of 14 in Ontario, you are legally able to get a job. And so I lived next to a ski hill, and I went to the resort and I got a job in their customer service department. So I would walk over to the top of the hill, snowboard down the hill, go to work every single day. Not every day. I worked most weekends and then sometimes in the evenings throughout the week. But I would snowboard down the hill, leave my stuff, change, get ready for work, and work for just a normal shift. And then at the end of the day, lifts would be closed. So my parents would come back and pick me up. Or sometimes if it was a normal day, I would go for a couple runs. If it was a Saturday and I had the afternoon, and then I would stop and walk back to the house. So this was a really cool first job. And I did this for 2 years in the winter while I was in high school. Now, while I was in high school, I did some sports, I was on some teams, and I would say that that was fairly ineffective in my life, to be completely frank with you. I don't really remember learning anything from sports. That's so bad, because I think that sports in high school is actually a great thing to do for people. I think that you should get your kids involved in sports. I think that it teaches like teamwork and how to collaborate and how to time manage everything. And maybe, okay, I did learn how to get some good time management skills. And I actually do talk about that in the book, but I did not learn how to be a part of a team. I did not learn how to collaborate well with others. I got kicked in the face twice, 2 seasons in a row, once in soccer and once in rugby, in the first game both times. Like literally, I don't know what was going on. When I was in rugby, I got bucket dumped. So it's technically like when you're standing like this and then you get sideswiped and you land on your head. And so someone came down while I had the ball and swiped my legs out and I like landed on my head and then they rucked over top of me. So I was like in a pike position, basically like this, like my head was here and then these were my legs and I was holding the ball here. And then they were like fighting over top of me while I was on the ground for the position of the ball. And they were like trying, and then someone stepped on my forehead with their cleats and I had cleat marks on my forehead. So that was in 10th grade. And then in 9th grade, I was in soccer. And on my 15th birthday, I got kicked in the face. Our goalie didn't show up for our first game. And so everyone was like, well, what are we going to do? And I was like, I'm not that great yet. Put me in net. I mean, if no one knows what to do, keep the star players on the field. Let's just sacrifice one for the team. And I was like, I'll just do net and see what happens. I mean, I still am 5-0. Why are you putting a 5-0 girl in a net that's 6 feet tall? Anyways, not the point. But I dove for a ball and this girl went to kick the ball. And instead of kicking the ball, she kicked my forehead. So I had a dent in my forehead. Not this one. This is actually, that scar's from a different thing. But yeah, got a concussion and whiplash and laid on the field. And then I got an ambulance ride on my 15th birthday. So that was fun. Scared my mom half to death when they were like, so we think she might have broken her neck. Walked around with like a neck brace on for like 3 weeks. Anyways, that was quite fun. So that was my experience with sports in high school. So I didn't really learn to like love my team. I continued to show up for games and whatever, but I couldn't play. I couldn't join practice. And so I never got that like camaraderie bond. And so anyways, continued on in high school. What other jobs did I have in high school? I worked at a summer camp. I worked at a summer camp for kids where I was a kayak instructor and taught kids to kayak for an entire summer. That was talk about a lesson learned, life growing experience working in a summer camp, an overnight summer camp. That's a stretching experience for a kid when you're not getting paid anything. And I just didn't love all of the people that I worked with, but I went with a friend and that made it all the better. So anyways, did that for a summer. And then I also worked at a trampoline park. And so it was a like Olympic trampoline park for people that were competing, not just like a crazy gym where a bunch of kids were jumping around. And so they would come in for lessons and I worked in the reception room, would just check people in, help them pay for their lessons or their coaching or competitions, whatever it was that they were doing at that moment. And that was really fun. I really loved that job. And we would it was like a vibe. It was really fun. That was the epitome of I did nothing, which is probably why I loved it so much. But anyways, and then from there, I worked at a different summer camp for 3 years. I started as just a co-lead. I worked for somebody, and then I managed the summer camp the summer after that and the following summer. That was so much fun. That was just me and a big boat and one co-leader and 7 kids all summer long. And it was really fun. We would go in the mornings out on the boat and take them and teach them how to wakeboard and mostly just kneeboard. And then in the afternoons, we would take them out on what was called a splash on pad or a whibbit, depending on whatever you're calling it. It was basically just a massive water obstacle course. And we would run around with them and just like play and throw them off and chuck them in the water and play hide and seek and tag and all those fun things. So that was an amazing, amazing job. I honestly can't recommend summer jobs more for kids. And I think that it's really hard because oftentimes parents are like, well, I want my kid to be a kid. I want my kid to experience being a young child. And I absolutely agree. I think that your kids should have the experience of being a child and not growing up too fast. But I do think that there are a bunch of jobs out there that are really fun and still offer a lot of life lessons along the way. So I would say that those summer camps taught me so much more than like any any school activities, extracurriculars, sports teams. Like I learned a lot from being a young employee and I really loved it. Like I genuinely have amazing memories of these things. And so sometimes as parents, I think people are looking at their children and they're like, do I put you in school? Do I put you in sports? Do you put 100% of your time into your studies? Do you potentially try this like hockey thing and like see if you can turn it into a career? And it can be so overwhelming and so challenging. And I think that the only correct answer is that there's literally no right answer. It's what's best for your kid. It's what's best for them. And luckily for me, my parents really gave me the autonomy to choose whatever I wanted to do. And I know that that sounds kind of crazy because you're like, well, it's a child. Like they shouldn't be allowed to. And yeah, you're right. To some degree, you do have to help your children understand what's best for them and you do have to help push them. But at the exact same time, if you help them understand how to make decisions for themselves based on a critical thinking mindset, it's going to be so much better for them in the end. And that's, I mean, what my parents did for me. And I'm more than like just so beyond grateful. But that started when I was like a baby. It started when I was a child. And my mom was like, no, you can't go on that play set. And I was like, but I want to. And I would scream. And she'd be like, okay. And I know that you want to. And I want you to be able to. But I know that that play set is covered in germs and you're not feeling well. And it probably wouldn't be fair for you to put your germs on there or for you to take others and get even more sick or whatever it was that she was trying to explain to me at the moment. But she, even as a toddler, would take the time to be like, no, because XYZ. And I think that that happened to a lot of Generation Z. And so for people who are managing Gen Zs, when they're telling them like XYZ, you have to blah, 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 and they're not giving them the opportunity to stand up and ask questions or stand up and understand why, it can be a really big rub. And so I don't know if that's an individual experience that I have seen a couple of times in our own company and in myself, or if that's something that's happening in a lot of other places, but that would be my guesstimation from it. Now, I think that that was perfectly acceptable, perfectly reasonable, because I'm currently waiting for a call from my doctor. But most employers would not think that that was perfectly reasonable. Now, unfortunately, it was not my doctor. It was a candidate. But I still wanted to take the time to talk to the candidate, get his information, make sure that he was taken care of, and then come back to this. And most people would be like, Hannah, that's absolutely ludicrous. Put yourself on Do Not Disturb. You're recording a podcast. And I would typically say, yes, absolutely. However, not while I'm waiting for a call from my doctor. And so I put this out there to say, because this is kind of a really weird concept, but I put this out there to say, your Generation Zs are, yes, addicted to their phones. Absolutely. They spend about 45 hours a week on their phones. But they are not unreasonably addicted to their phones. They genuinely feel like there's a reason to keep it on them. And so you might not agree with this reason. I might not agree with this reason, but for them, whatever that reason is, feels valid in their brains. And so before, as an employer, you're like, hey, no phones, put it down. We don't do that here. Or whatever it is that you do to get them to put it away. Ideally, it's not that. I want you to talk to them about why they have it out. I want you to listen to their answers, and I want you to try to understand what they're saying to you before you spit back at them. So, for example, I had a father a couple of days ago who came up to me and he was like, Hannah, my kids, okay? We were talking about his children. It wasn't about his Gen Z employees. He was like, my kids, I don't understand what to do. She's always on her phone. It doesn't make sense to me. I can't comprehend. She doesn't have any friends. She never brings them over. She doesn't blah, 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 XYZ. And I was like, wait. Stop. Is this normal for her? And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, was it normal for her that she doesn't have people over to the house? And he was like, no, like she used to hang out with her friends all the time. Now she says that she's only seeing them on her phone and XYZ, blah, 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 blah. She's so depressed. She's upset. I'm like, Hello, let's have a conversation about this. Like, take a step back and look at this for a second. She used to have a lot of friends. She's currently addicted to her phone. She says that all of her friends are on her phone, but she's never talking to them. Dude, maybe she's going through a really hard time and her friends are Xing her out and she's addicted to her phone because she sees that they're together on a regular basis. She's seeing that they're posting together. She's seeing that they're on Snapchat together. She's watching Snap Maps. She's watching stories pop up. There are so many things that could possibly be slapping her back in the face saying, like, that's obviously a very extreme example. But did he ask questions? Did he take the time to try and understand? Or did he make a preconceived guess, which I just did? I'll be honest about that. But guess about her being lazy and not wanting to go see her friends anymore? Or is there something else going on? And so it's so much more about saying, hey, honey, what's going on? Why are you on your phone so much? I feel like I haven't talked to you in a couple days. Oh, I'm just blah blah blah. Okay, what are you doing? What apps are you on? What's so interesting? Help me understand. Put me in the loop. What's so funny? I want to be in on it. And then, oh, I'm just doomsday scrolling on social media. Oh, doomsday scrolling. I love doing that sometimes too. What's the wormhole you're going down right now? Where are you? Oh, I'm just looking at this girl's page. I just really love her. Oh, cool. Why? What do you love about her? What's going on? Oh, well, she's just really interesting because she cuts dogs' hair. And I think that it's really cool the way that she does it. And I've always wanted to learn. Oh, that's so cool. Why do you find that interesting? Oh, because I've always wanted to know how to do this. Oh, really? I didn't know that. I didn't know that that was a passion of yours. I didn't know that was a hobby of yours. I didn't know that you cared about that. And so obviously these are very extreme examples. You're leading a path down a bunny hole, but there are bunnies at the end of rabbit holes, and there are reasons that your Gen Zs are doing these things. And so try to follow the path and find the rabbit to see what it is. I think it's really interesting because oftentimes people will tell me that they're in a different world, and they had said this to me for a really long time, like, Gen Z's live in a different world. And I like brushed it off as yeah, they do live in a different world. But the other day while I was watching the Super Bowl, I had like a bit of a light bulb moment where I was sitting around a room with my father, my husband, my mom, a couple people. We were all watching the Super Bowl very, very differently. So my mom and my husband's mom and myself were chit-chatting, enjoying food, eating, kind of walking around, playing with the dogs. Then my husband, my dad, and my father-in-law were just zoned into the game, watching it, loving it. And I was thinking a lot about the different attention that these different groups were putting on the technology. So we had all watched the Super Bowl, but we did not all watch the Super Bowl. And so for them, they were like in the Super Bowl. They could have just been there. But for us, it was basically just background noise going on. And so then I was thinking about the way that different generations absorb and understand technology around them. And for Generation Z, oftentimes when I'm doing something like this, I'm like in my computer. Like, the rest of the world around me really doesn't exist. It's fairly irrelevant, except for the other things that I'm trying to put attention into, like this. And so for so many people, their phones are actually just a different world. And this is a really interesting like mind switch, because people typically have their mental world, what's going on in their brain, and then they have their physical world. I can touch. Sorry, my dog started barking aggressively loud, and I needed to turn that off and save you from it. But, anyways, so I think that the pivot here is that people are thinking about two worlds. They're thinking about the external world and their internal world. But Generation Z was raised with this third world of technology. And so for a lot of them, they're living here, here, and here. And for this, it is not only a memory, a storage, but an opportunity. And so it's so much. It's their past, their present, and their future. And so if I were to open up my phone, I mean, I will. I've got TikTok open. I've got pictures. I've got all of my apps. I've got everything organized Oh, actually, I don't have anything organized that you can see today right now because all I have at this moment is a block on my phone so that I don't get any messages or anything. But I do have all of my pictures organized. I do have all of my notes organized. I do have all of my apps organized and all of those things. And so, in a lot of ways, that actually feels a little bit like an extension of my brain. And so, in so many ways, I have all of those hard drive files of my brain function, but then I also have all of the apps like social medias and networking. That's a different function. It's part of my friends, it's part of my network, it's how I connect with people. I had 4 FaceTime calls yesterday where I was connecting with different friends of mine and catching up on their lives and hearing from them. And that felt just as good to me as going for coffee with them, which is such a weird perspective for so many people. But it's because that's literally a different world in my brain rather than just a tool I use in the 2 other universes I exist in. And so that's a bit of a pivot that I want you to think about when you're trying to figure out how to communicate with the Gen Zs around you. It's not only seeing them as being on their phone, but trying to understand what's going on this device that you might not be a part of, this world that you might not be a part of, that your children are living in. And so what are they doing on their social medias? Do they have a page that they're managing? Do they have a network they're trying to grow? Are they trying to pursue being an influencer here or there, or trying to post these types of videos and podcasts? Are they doing something like this that's consuming so much of their time and attention that you just aren't even aware of? And so it's not just being like those Gen Zs and their damn phones. It's looking at them and understanding their perception of what they're doing and accepting that for the way that they've accepted it. And if you don't understand the way that they've accepted it, that's fine, but let's at least try to come to an understanding or a ground level of respect with one another through that. And so it's hard. It is hard because there are so many things that my parents do that I don't understand, that I'm trying to just accept and respect. But it can be challenging to do that with people with different generations when you don't understand what's going on. And so that's just a little bit of technology, and it's such a side rant that I went down. But anyways, that was my high school experience. Moving into university now. When I was in university, I went to the biggest Christian school I could find. I found one in the US. I desperately wanted to go. I was so excited. I got accepted. I went and I absolutely hated it. If anybody knows anything about the Liberty Way, it's unique. It's interesting. It's the only way that I can describe it is through the word fines. You get so many fines at Liberty University if you're not going to live up to the Liberty Way. And the Liberty Way is a lot of different things. It is not drinking, not smoking, not speaking in tongue, or not in tongue. Oh my gosh, not using the Lord's name in vain, not swearing, not so very basic stuff that you would expect from a Christian school. But then it's also not wearing pajamas to class, not wearing sweatpants to class, not wearing shorts to class. It is pants, slacks, and skirts, and that's it. And so if you don't get one of those, if you don't do one of those things, you get a fine. It is showing up to church 3 times a week, which is, I mean, it is what it is. But then it's also making sure that your room is clean so that when your RAs go through it, you don't get a fine, because every time that your room is checked, it is checked for cleanliness. And one time I emptied my garbage, blew my nose before I left, and got a fine because I had a tissue in my trash bin. So anyways, that's the Liberty Way, and I personally didn't love it. So I only spent about 1 semester at school, and then I transitioned home. I went to their online program, and I started, oh my gosh, I mean, I just started working as hard as I could. I had 3 jobs when I lived at home. And I worked at a gym as a front desk receptionist. I worked at an indoor golf lounge as a bartender, and then I worked for the family business. And so I was double dipping, because I was working for the family business while I was doing those other 2 things on a very regular basis, doing our on-call and after hours, which was so much fun. And I was just saving as much money as I possibly could, but I didn't really know for what. And at this point, someone from my church reached out to me. They were like, "Hannah, we're going to go to Florida for a month. Do you want to come and nanny for us?" And I was like, absolutely, I do. And so I quit my jobs, burned some bridges, which was weird because that was the first time that I had ever done that. Normally I had left jobs with so much respect But this one at the gym did not work out that way. The indoor golf lounge was just fine. And I left them expecting to go to Florida. And then about 3 days before we were supposed to leave, it all fell apart. And so what did I do? I reached out to as many churches in Florida that were a part of the chain of churches I was a part of. So I went to a Harvest Bible Chapel at this time, and it was basically just like a Dunkin' Donuts. Like they're just franchised everywhere. And so I reached out to all of them in Florida and was like, hey, I'm a Liberty University student. I noticed you're looking for help in XYZ department. Do you know anyone who'd be willing to house somebody that would love to come and do this for you? So I just looked for different volunteer positions, different job opportunities, and I took one. And I heard back from someone, and it was actually crazy because I had graduated high school a semester early and gone on a mission trip to Haiti, which I didn't even touch on, but was a massive part of my journey. And in that missions trip, I met somebody while I was at dinner one night, and it was the person that eventually reached back out to me from one of the places here in Florida. And it was crazy because I didn't even remember it, but he did. He was like, "You look so familiar." And we pieced everything back together. And it was such a crazy world connection, and just such a great example of how the world is so freaking small, and how Generation Z sees the world as so tiny, because it really is. It's like you're just one connection away from another person, or I think it's like 5 or 6 connections away from everybody in the world. And so that's mind blowing to me. But I love connecting with people, and so I mean, moving to Florida didn't even feel like a thing. But basically, what happened was I lost that opportunity, gained another opportunity, came down here to be by myself I was only supposed to be here for a month, and I ended up staying for 2 because I just loved it so much. And I really wanted to move down here. But because I had graduated high school early, I also wanted to graduate university early. And the only way that I could see moving down here was transitioning from Liberty University online to a campus here in Florida. So I applied, went through a crazy process, kind of made it through, and then eventually found out that I was going to take what was going to be a 4-year bachelor's degree that I had turned into a 3-year degree because I had just fast tracked so much into a 5.5-year degree, because I would have to give up all the Bible courses that I had done and all of the religious stuff, and that didn't have any valid credit in the new university that I was moving into. And so I didn't want to do that, and I rejected it, and I continued in my Liberty University online. But I connected with an actual stranger. I had met a friend of a friend of a friend who was looking for a roommate, and I FaceTimed with her. I was in Canada at that time because I had come down here, spent the 2 months, loved it, tried to transition to the school, couldn't figure it out, moved back home to Canada, or just went back home to Canada because I had told somebody I would come and work there. And this was the last summer that I was that wakeboard instructor. And through that summer, I had reapplied to go back to Liberty and tried a couple different avenues. I had applied to a couple different things, and I was realistically kind of going to go back to Liberty. This was my mindset. But I was like, literally, why am I doing this? Because I just couldn't fathom staying back in my hometown at this time. So I was choosing anything to leave, even though I already knew that I had had a bad experience there and didn't actually like it there. But it was still better than just being back in my parents' basement for another year. And I mean, I have so much love and so much respect for my parents, but just as a 19-year-old, I didn't want to be there again. And so was ready to go back to Liberty. And all of a sudden, this friend of a friend of a friend reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I know somebody that needs a roommate in Florida. Are you still looking for a place to live?" And I was like, I mean, no, but like, yes. And so I reached out to this friend of a friend of a friend and connected with her, and we FaceTimed, and I really, really liked her. And so I was like, I don't really know what to do. And I went on her Instagram page, and I very vividly remember going through the people that she followed that I also followed. And we both followed Grayson. And Grayson is my now husband. And I didn't even know him at this point. We were just strangers. I had met him at the cable park once or twice while I was visiting in that couple months prior. And I reached out to him and I was like, "Hey, do you know this Megan girl? I'm thinking about moving in with her. I know you don't really know me, but like, do you think it's a good idea? Do you have any knowledge on the subject. And he was like, well, I actually am living in the room that you would be moving into. I'm just about to move out. I'm her current roommate. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. And so he had just gotten a dog and the situation wasn't working, but the room was available. And so he moved out and I moved in, which was just so funny because I was trusting the word of two strangers that are now my best friend and husband. And so, or one of my best friends, I've got so many of them. But anyways, so crazy to think that that was the journey, but that's how I ended up full time here. And then when I was here, I was done 2 years of my degree. So I started substitute teaching and I was working on my third and final year of my education. Substitute teaching, wakeboarding, loving my life, just kind of had worked really hard and was super excited to be here and finally kind of like living that dream. And then COVID hit and I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? I had like saved for so long to get here, spent the money to get here, and like loved my life. And I'd finally been able to create like a sustainable income so that I could continue to be here. But I had just graduated and I was starting to look at full time employment. But in full time employment, I didn't want to stay a teacher. That wasn't what I was called to be. I didn't love it. And so I was trying to look at something in business. But typically in business, when you're getting your first job, you get 2 years of vacation in your second year, and you get to borrow one of those vacations back into your first year. That's kind of an average business vacation layout. And so that's what I was looking at this time. And at that moment, Canada was still requiring a 14-day lockdown quarantine. And I wasn't willing to not see my family because I was like, okay, I've got a week of vacation here in the next year and 14 days of quarantine. That's mandatory if I cross the border. My family won't be able to come here. I won't be able to go there. This isn't going to work. And so I moved back home to Canada into a house that my brothers and I had purchased. And they lived upstairs. I lived downstairs. We all worked for the family business. And it was really great. Like, honestly, it was a really good situation. I had my first big girl job working as a customer service rep in our business, where I was just connecting with clients and customers and trying to make sure that they were okay and trying to see how we could help them. And that was fine. As the definition was fine. It wasn't good. It wasn't great. I honestly was really struggling mentally at this point in time because I was experiencing some depression through COVID, through lockdown, not able to see anybody, living on my own for the first time, and working my first like big girl job. And so that meant that I was going into the office through the winter when it was dark and coming out when it was dark. And I was working in an office that had no windows. And it was just horrible for my mental health. Now, I like to think that I'm a fairly resilient person, but frankly, I couldn't last through this. And so I said to my dad, I was like, I love you. I love you. I love this business. I would love to continue to work in this business, but I could not keep going the way that it was set up when I first got there. And when I first got there, it was set up like every other office. Every normal office. We went in at 8, we left at 5, we had lunch, we had breaks, we had great coworkers, and it was a very normal office experience. But I mentally wasn't strong enough to experience it the way that it was. And so I started asking for some stuff like working from home. And I went to once a week, I worked from home, and I was in a room that had windows, and that was phenomenal because I got to see the light of day just once a week through the windows of my basement apartment. But that was still better. And so I had that one kind of midday that gave me like a relief, and then I could keep moving forward. And then I really was struggling with the work that I was doing. I was like, I know that this needs to be done. I know that it's important, but damn, it's really boring. And so for a really long time, we struggled through that, and I worked through it. And eventually it got to a spot where I did just a little bit of marketing work, and it gave me something really yummy to feed on every single week. And then as we moved through this process, we started replicating it, and we brought in so many Gen Z interns. It was phenomenal. And they followed the same kind of path that I did in this new program that we had really laid out for most of our employees. And it worked great. We had fantastic retention of our Gen Zs. And that's when I decided that I wanted to move to the US. And this is when flexibility really just had to prove itself. So I wanted to move to the US, and our entire business is in Canada. And so rather than my dad being like, no, you can't do that. We live here, we work here. This is what it is. He was like, okay, let's figure out how to make this work for everybody involved. And so I came here and I started a business that partners with the one that we have in Canada. And we've been working side by side for a year and a half now in collaboration with one another. And it is literally phenomenal. I absolutely love it. We've got a couple employees here in the US now. We've got a couple really great accounts here in the US now that we're starting to function forward. And it's really coming back around, and it's been wonderful. But through that, I started giving these Generation Z employee presentations and speeches, and how to retain them and how to bring them in and how to keep them in your office and coming back and wanting more. And it's been amazing, like actually phenomenal. And I have really been able to dive into this. I care so much about Gen Z because I think that they are the future of the working world, because they are. I mean, by next year, 27% of the working force is going to be Generation Z. That's crazy. And so in 5 years, in 50 years, what's that going to look like? And how is that going to come out on the other end? Well, I don't really know, but what I would love to do is just offer them the resources now to set them up for success for the future. And that's kind of how this podcast came to be. So through all of that, I've had so many different questions about who Gen Z is and why they are the way they are and why they behave the way they do and how we can communicate and effectively come out the other side of it in a collaborative relationship. And I think that honestly, it's going to be hard. And I can understand that, and I can appreciate that. And I can have so much space for that because I've just spent the last 3 years of my life trying to figure it out, and I still don't know. But ideally, if we can just try to move forward with some very open conversations with one another, even if we don't agree with one another, respectfully disagreeing with one another, then I think that we'll be in a much better place. And so really that's what this series is all about, is talking to Gen Z and understanding their story and why they made the decisions that they made and how those pivots came to be and how they've turned into the person that they are. Because I think that when we look at somebody and we meet them, it's really easy to say, I don't like you, or I don't get you, or I don't understand. But realistically, that's simply a misunderstanding. It is, I don't know you well enough, and I need to take some more time to sit down and talk to you so I can understand who you are and why you do the things that you do. And so it's been really interesting. I never expected that I could spend almost an hour with any person just talking to them. But it's really easy. It's really easy to just sit and listen and try and learn. But I do a lot of listening through these podcasts and through these stories. And so I wanted to take just a little bit of time to explain to you who I am and why I am the way I am, because you see me every single week on these podcasts, but you're not really learning anything about me. And so that's a little bit about me. That's kind of who I am and the path that I went down and the journey that I took to get where I am. And honestly, it's so much more than that. And if you want to read more than that or understand more than that and learn, I actually have a memoir that I put out called Well Shit that I would love for you guys to go and check out. But it, like most things I do, is for the next generation. It's for Gen Zs. It was actually made with the hopes of giving to my one day children. It was all the lessons that I have accumulatively learned through the different people around me and how they've taught those lessons to me, told through stories. And so just stories of my life. And I made it for my one day daughter because I was like, she's not going to want to listen to me when I'm old and gray, and that's fine. But I still want to have the ability to influence her from where she's at. And so I took the time to write it. And it was a diary at first. Actually, I have the diary. I found it just a couple days ago. It's so cute. It's a staffing mastery diary because we love Dan, but I called it the Pumpkin Patch Project. And it just started as so many pages of notes and then eventually turned into a book. That's crazy, eh? They went from this to this. And so this is the book. I absolutely love it. You should definitely check it out. But I also have two other books in case you need them. But I actually don't know where they are. Hold on. Oh, here they are. Well, we've got them. Got one of them. Got this one, Better Together Group of Companies. This is a book that's, I found cash. Fun for me. This is a book that was written with the hopes to help teach employers how to hire on the 3 I's. So in this one, we talk all about what it means, what the 3 I's are, and why we talk about them. We talk about some questions that you can ask to understand if you're hiring by the 3 I's. Now, the 3 I's are intentionality, integrity, and intensity. And we just talk about what that means and how you see that in an employee. And then it's a booklet that has all of the little time slots. You can keep notes about who you're interviewing and how you're interviewing them. And it's just an interview book. And then my other book, I cannot possibly find because that would be way too easy. But it is a book all about how to get a job, how to find a job when you're out of work, how to dress when you're going to an interview, how to write your resume, how to get a job. And so all those are on Amazon. Welsh It is also on Barnes and Nobles. But I just love creating content, and that's really what this all stems back to. But hopefully something can be helpful to you. And if not, I hope that you can pass it along to someone else who might find some benefit from it. But anyways, thank you so much for listening and for joining in. And hopefully you'll be able to come back for so many more. But bye for now.